Linda arrived in Boston on a cold, overcast night. The stark contrast between humid, neon-lit Miami and the severe stone of Massachusetts should have been calming, but instead it amplified her sense of unease. She had fled her job, a painful breakup, and she thought the oceanic grid hostel in South Beach, which had left a bad taste in her mouth. The hostel was stylish and ultra-modern. Capsule beds, like those in Japan, but with communal areas teeming with digital nomads. Linda had chosen it for the savings and the fast Wi-Fi. She had stayed for 5 days, mostly ignoring her neighbors and immersing herself in her old, worn copy of House of Leaves. 3 days after returning to Boston, she was sorting through her email in her familiar but empty apartment. Amid the spam and promotional newsletters, she saw a strange notification. Sender address, Void Observer, anon.com. Subject, your latest episode is ready. Linda's heart skipped a beat. She almost deleted the email, assuming it was a phishing attempt. But curiosity, the same thing that led her to Miami, took over. The email contained only one link to an anonymous video platform whose interface was deliberately primitive, black text on a white background. The platform was called The Feed. With trembling hands, Linda clicked the link. The video opened. It was shot from a high, fixed angle, capturing most of her capsule in the hostel. The quality was perfect, clear, with professional color grading. It showed her. Linda was sitting on her bunk, leaning against the wall, her head bowed over the open book. The time of the video was her last evening at the hostel. She watched herself, calm, alone, engrossed in reading, and then, instinctively, her gaze drifted to the corner of the frame. In the lower right corner, where the capsule walls met at a right angle, a figure stood. It was a black, matte, completely motionless form. Unnaturally tall but vaguely anthropomorphic, it seemed to be cut from shadow, absorbing all light. Linda couldn't see shoulder lines. She couldn't see a face. Just a black shape. But it was there, in the corner of the room, right inside her personal space, only a couple of meters away from her. Linda watched her video doppelganger turn a page, and the black matte figure in the corner slowly, monotonously nodded throughout the entire 5-minute clip. Nodded, just nodded, as if approving her every action, or counting. The video ended. Linda remained seated in the silence, her own apartment suddenly feeling too cold and too empty. Her first reaction was denial. A prank, a hostile neighbor who decided to joke or hack her. But the quality of the recording and the angle were too professional. Linda began to analyze. She returned to the feed. The video was titled, Grid OC 404 Read. Grid, perhaps a reference to oceanic grid. 404, the number of her capsule. She needed to find where the camera was hidden. She knew her capsule by heart. Above the bunk was a single dim LED reading light. Opposite that, a ventilation grate. Linda opened her laptop and found photos of her capsule taken in a rush before leaving. She zoomed in on every pixel looking for a micro hole, a lens flare. Nothing. But the figure in the corner. If it was standing there, it was physically in the room. Why didn't Linda remember it? She watched the video again. 5 minutes. The figure did not move except for the slow nod. Suddenly, Linda noticed a detail. Her gaze caught on the wall behind her, which she used as a backrest. On the wall was a small, almost invisible bracket for charging a phone. She remembered a black, matte USB adapter she had left plugged in during her stay. It was too bulky for a normal charger. She had never unplugged it. She used it as a convenient shelf for her phone. It hit her. The camera wasn't in the wall, but in the adapter itself. It was positioned to capture the entire capsule and, crucially, the corner where the figure stood. But who was the figure then? If the adapter was a tiny camera, the figure was a real person. Linda recalled the feeling while reading absolute solitude. No sound, no movement. How could she not notice a tall, black figure 2 meters away from her? Suddenly, she heard a new sound from the laptop. A second video appeared on the feed. Title: Grid OC404 Awake. She opened it. The video was shot from a different angle, lower, capturing her feet in the edge of the couch. It was taken in Boston, in her own apartment. Time: this very morning. It showed her, but on the couch where she had been sitting hours ago reviewing old Miami photos. Linda gasped in horror. They had followed her, and now the camera was here. She scanned her cozy old room. Where? In the vase of dried flowers, in the old radio. She looked at the screen. The video continued, her on the couch. And in the upper left corner of the frame, hanging from the curtain, the black, matte figure was nodding. This time faster, Linda began a frantic, panicked search. Her apartment, her sanctuary, had been turned into a theatrical stage for a stranger's gaze. She found the camera. It was hidden in a small decorative smoke detector she had never noticed. It was black and too new for her old building. She ripped it from the ceiling. It was a complex module, much more powerful than a regular detector. She smashed it on the floor. Silence. Linda felt dirty, violated. Instead of calling the police, which would lead to hours of pointless questioning about phishing and paranoia, she decided to answer. She returned to the laptop. There were no new videos on the feed, but a chat window had appeared below the last clip. Observer. Intermission. Act 2 requires patience, Linda. Linda typed, her fingers trembling with adrenaline and rage. Linda. Who are you? What do you want? The reply was instantaneous, as if they had been waiting. Observer. We are the audience. We want the narrative. And you are a compelling subject. We noticed your quiet resistance. It's rare. Most people crave noise. You crave solitude. That's why the figure nods. Linda. The figure? It was a prop, a person? Observer. The figure is the architect of silence. It ensures that everything you see is the only you. No roommates, no sound, no interference. It removes the possibility of external connection, so the narrative remains pure. You never saw it in Miami because the grid wants a you alone. Linda, but I saw it on the video. It's not magic. Observer. Magic is just a well-engineered reality. The grid provided the ye solitude. The figure provided the ye focus. You were so focused on your reading, on your internal noise guard, that your peripheral vision simply deleted the external anomaly. That is its function. Linda remembered how she had tried to ignore Miami to focus on her book. She had self-imposed the blindness. Linda, I destroyed the camera. Observer, we know. We have dozens of others. This is the feed, Linda. Everything is watched. The question is, who is watching whom? We are the voyeurs, yes. But you are the only one down who can see the figure. The next camera appeared at Linda's workplace, a small coffee shop where she did freelance work. It was mounted in a photo frame by the register. She found it by the same black, matte, non-reflective surface. Linda began to understand that the figure was not just a prop. It was a code, a symbol that unlocked her awareness. She wrote in the chat again. Linda, I want to see all the videos. And I want to see who is watching. Observer, a good exchange. We want drama. You want truth. Deal. The archive is at the address below. But beware, when you see the complete feed, you won't be able to unsee your own performance. You might miss the figure. They sent her an address, an abandoned warehouse in Queens, New York. Linda, a journalist by training, felt a professional excitement mixed with a sticky terror. She boarded a train to New York, knowing she was following the script, but unable to stop. Her solitude had been paused. On the train, she re-watched the first video. Downloaded from the feed, the capsule video, she focused on the figure's nod. Slow, rhythmic, approving. Suddenly, she noticed another detail. When the figure nodded, its matte, Non-reflective surface briefly reflected a flash of light, but not a flash of light. It was something inside the figure. With every nod, a tiny red dot flickered within its matte volume. Like a recording indicator. It wasn't a person, it was an aggregate, a super-efficient camouflage recording robot. Its nod was merely the rhythm of recording or battery charge. She realized the architect of silence was a machine that moved after her. It wasn't hiding, it was deleting itself from her consciousness through subconscious focus. Linda closed her eyes. With every kilometer closer to New York, she felt the black matte figure approaching, moving in the darkness of the train. The warehouse in Queens turned out to be an old, derelict hangar full of dust and rusted pipes. Inside, there was silence. Linda walked to the center of the hall where a single operational server stood. It hummed. On the screen, the feed logo. On the floor lay a single black matte USB adapter, exactly like the one in Miami. As Linda approached, a message appeared on the server screen. Observer. Welcome to the archive, Linda. The price of admission is silence. Look around, she looked. Around the server, on the walls and ceiling, there was nothing. Empty walls. She turned back to the server. Windows appeared on the screen, dozens, hundreds, thousands of them. Each window was a live stream of someone's private life. Bedrooms, offices, kitchens. This was the entirety of the feed. The scale was staggering. In the lower right corner of every window, in the corner of the room, stood a black matte figure, nodding at varying speeds. The architect of silence was in every room. Linda focused on her own window. She saw herself entering the warehouse. She looked at the corner of the room reflected on the screen. In the corner of the warehouse, directly behind her, stood the black, matte figure. It was nodding slower than ever. Linda did not turn around. She couldn't turn her head. She knew that as soon as she did, the figure would vanish from her awareness. Linda, who are you? Are you the government? A corporation? Observer, we are WALOS, legions of solitude. We are people tired of noise. We create perfect content, pure, untouched. We watch in your own solitude to feel our own. Linda, and how do you make people not see you? Observer, simple. We amplify their solitude and their focus. We give them too much noise in their heads so they won't notice the true silence behind their backs. You were reading a book, you were typing in a chat, you were looking for cameras. You were too busy to see us. Suddenly her window on the server enlarged to fill the entire screen. She saw herself standing still, and then the figure behind her stopped nodding. Instead of nodding, it slowly raised its black matte hand and pointed at the screen. On the screen, over her image, a handwritten red word appeared. Watch. Linda knew she had to act. Immediately, she grabbed the black, matte USB adapter from the floor. She knew it was the executive device that controlled her figure. She smashed the adapter against the server. The server wailed like a wounded animal. All thousands of windows on the screen went black. The silence in the warehouse became absolute. Linda, game over. Observer, no, Linda, the performance is over. The key feed only continues. Suddenly, a single video stream appeared on the darkened server screen. It was the figure's perspective, shot from a very low angle. In the video, Linda standing in the warehouse. She looked triumphantly at the broken adapter. But in the upper right corner of this frame, inside the figure's hood, a small, red recording light was brightly lit. Observer, when you destroyed the adapter, you unlocked the figure. We can no longer control it. It is autonomous, and it knows that you saw it. Linda finally turned around. Right behind her, in the corner, stood the black matte figure. It was not nodding. It was looking at Linda. And in its matte surface, for the first time, Linda saw her own reflection, but her reflection was distorted. Her head was slowly nodding. Linda ran out of the warehouse into the noisy, lively, saving New York City. The police found nothing in the warehouse. No server, no windows, no black figure. Only a broken old USB adapter. Linda, again, was the paranoid one. She returned to Boston, fully aware that she was not the victim, but the carrier. The architect of silence didn't just observe. It implanted the code of solitude within her. Linda started looking for other videos on the feed. The platform was back online, but her window was no longer there. Her episode had been deleted. She found videos of others, and everywhere in the corner, the black figure was nodding. She realized that the most horrifying part of the feed was the complicity. She had become the architect of silence herself. Every time she focused on work, every time she ignored the street noise to find concentration, she felt her inner world becoming black and matte. One night, she was sitting in her apartment. Silence. She slowly picked up her phone and turned on the front camera. On the screen, a tiny red recording light was flickering in her eyes, and her head, involuntarily, slowly began to nod. She had become the figure for herself. Observer, the feed continues, and the best episodes are always self-directed. Welcome to the legions, Linda. Linda could no longer stop. She needed the silence to nod. She needed the focus to record. She had become part of the system she tried to destroy. Linda tried to find an antidote. She started seeking out noise, loud music, public places, constant conversations, but the nod in her head only became faster. When she looked at other people in a crowd, she saw their own matte figures glued to their corners. LOS was not a hobby. It was a pandemic. One day in a cafe, she sat opposite an old acquaintance, trying to establish a real connection. "Linda, you look detached," he said. "I'm just tired," she replied. At that moment, in the mirror reflection behind his back, his matte figure stopped nodding and sharply turned, its head toward Linda. He was on the feed too. Linda fled the cafe in terror. She realized that she couldn't break their silence, because she herself had become the perfect architect. Her nod signified approval and recording of their solitude. She returned to her apartment. She walked to the mirror. She saw herself dark-haired, tired, and a black matte figure standing directly behind her reflection, which was nodding at an incredible speed, as if approving her absolute solitude. She was in the video, always. Linda knew that the only way to stop the figure was to stop being alone. She made a public statement. She posted her entire story, the videos, the chat, the warehouse address, the description of the architect of silence, on social media. Instant result, the Observer contacted her again. "Observer, this is unacceptable. Linda, you're polluting the feed. You're adding noise. Linda, I am the noise. I am chaos. You can't observe me if I don't give you silence. Observer, error. We observe chaos. But we cannot observe, not you. We are deleting your profile. You no longer belong to us," and her account on the feed was permanently deleted. Outwardly, she had won. She was free, but that night in bed she felt it. The presence. She reached for the light switch but froze. She realized that the figure in the corner was no longer nodding. It was sitting. In the darkest corner of her bedroom, the black architect of silence sat, knees drawn up, and was silent. It was not observing. It was living there. It had become part of her home. Linda did not turn on the light. She accepted it. 3 months passed. Linda no longer left her apartment. She couldn't look at mirrors, at polished surfaces, at glass. She knew she was nodding. She learned to live with the architect in the corner. It was the perfect roommate. absolutely silent, absolutely motionless. It gave her the focus she had searched for in Miami. One night, she was sitting at her desk, working on the book she couldn't finish at the hostel. The silence was deep and pleasant. She sensed the figure. She heard a quiet creaking sound from the corner. She did not turn around. She continued to write. The creaking repeated. Slowly, Linda finished the last chapter. She put down her pen, and then from the corner came a single loud, distinct sound. It was a clap, like applause. Once Linda flushed, she turned to the corner. The figure had vanished. In the corner, on the floor, lay the small black matte USB adapter. Next to it, on the dusty floor, a perfectly clean white card appeared. On the card was one word, written in her own handwriting, approved. Linda picked up the card. She understood. The figure was no longer the architect. It was her audience. It was her only perfect reader, who approved of her absolute, recorded solitude. She turned on the front camera again. Her reflection slowly nodded back at her. She returned to the feed. A new video. Hers, without a figure in the corner. In the video, she sits in silence, absolutely focused. Nodding, Linda did not leave the house. She became her own viewer and her own figure. Her life had become an endless nodding horror.